Okay. Oh. So, we're continuing with chapter 9 of the Avatamsaka. 3 classes left, right, Ken? Tonight? What? Today's the 28th. Okay, so a total of 3. Okay, so a total of 3 classes left for the semester, but not of the Avatamsaka, because we're only on chapter 9. We're going to get to chapter 40. Chapter 9 is a short chapter. It's some of you will go after rebirth and come back again, and we'll still be doing this lecture. Yeah. That's what I've heard at one time, again and again, in one life and another life and another life. So, I'm on page 56, 57. We're starting the new section. There's 2 more sections of verses. There's 10 verses each in each section. This is an Avatamsaka pattern. And so we're on the last 2 sections of verses. And we'll start, and I'll read, and we're doing the refrain in between Arshur, Guangming, Guyi, Shijie. So it says, at that time, a light passed through 10 million worlds and everywhere illumined a billion worlds to the east. It was also like this in the south, the west, the north, and the 4 directions in between, as well as above and below. Within each of those worlds, there were a billion Jambudvipas, reaching up to a billion ultimate form heavens. All of these were clearly revealed in this light. And just as in this place one could see the thus come one seated on his lotus flower treasury lion's throne, with bodhisattvas as many as fine motes of dust in 10 Buddha lands circumambulating him, so too in each of those billions of Jambudvipas there were billions of thus come ones seated in that way. Because of the spiritual power of the Buddha, in each of the 10 directions there was a great bodhisattva who was accompanied by bodhisattvas as to the number of fine motes of dust in 10 Buddha lands, who came to that Buddha's place. Their names were Manjushri and others. They came from countries called Golden Colored Light and others, and the Buddha they served were called Unmoving Wisdom, thus come one and others. And at that time, in the presence of those Buddhas, the voices of Manjushri Bodhisattvas in all those places rang out in unison as they spoke verses. So here we have the refrain that then leads in, and this was the same one that's been repeated. Sometimes it's easy to sort of not say much about these refrains, and sometimes I notice my teacher's commentary, he perfunctorily goes over it once he does an initial explanation, or sometimes he goes into it in great detail or picks up on something to emphasize. So tonight, before I go into those verses, I found a commentary of his that I remember at this time being there. And I was not going to share it, but somehow it just struck me, so I'm going to bring it out and share it, because it has 2 themes here. One theme is, what is this thing we call Buddhism? He's making a comment on that. And the other theme, again, maybe a second theme, has to do with this idea of ages of Buddhism, the Dharma proper age, the declining age, and the Dharma ending age. And he makes a comment and observation on that. And for me, the third point is, which I completely missed until I was thinking about this tonight, is the plurality of this section we just read. And I want to talk about that, but I'm just going to say it now while it's still fresh in my mind, and then hopefully come back to it. In that one place, you could see a thus come one seated on a lion's throne, and bodhisattvas as many as motes of dust. And then it says there were billions of thus come ones. Billions of thus come ones. and billions of bodhisattvas. And these Buddha lands were also numerous. And the Buddhas they served were all called. What you have here is not one Buddha or one bodhisattva, or even the bodhisattvas we're familiar with. What you have is a mind-boggling proliferation of Buddhas and bodhisattvas. And I think this is important, and I want to go into this later tonight. So those are three things, but I wanted to read this commentary from my teacher. And I'm starting. This is on the section just following this refrain. The Buddha Dharma flourishes and declines according to the karmic obstacles of living beings. Okay, I just want to start with a phrase. It's not that there's some fixed cyclical period going on that, like you have winter, fall, and summer and spring, and you have proper Dharma, declining Dharma, Dharma gone, and then proper Dharma coming back, as if this was a fixed cycle. That first line is it declines or flourishes according to the karmic obstacles of living beings. So there's an interrelationship with Dharma coming in, incipient, arising, and staying for a while, or staying for a long while, and declining and actually going out for a while, and it's not unrelated to, very closely related to the karma of living beings. So there's this reciprocity between, and you saw this before in the Platform Sutra, the Dharma arises because of the causes and conditions and needs and confusions of living beings. It doesn't exist out there independent of that interactive dynamic. So here you have the first line Master Hua does, flourishes and declines according to the karma and obstacles of living beings. If evil karma of living beings is heavy, then the Buddha Dharma will deteriorate. If bad karma of living beings is light, then the Buddha Dharma will flourish. Sometimes the Buddha Dharma flourishes quickly and declines quickly, and other times it flourishes and comes to an end slowly. When Shakyamuni Buddha appeared in the Saha world, some people believed in the Buddha, and others listened to the Buddha Dharma but didn't believe in it. It's very interesting. During the proper Dharma age, one also finds aspects of both Dharma image and Dharma ending age. Now this is just a really interesting, very Avatamsaka-like expression. It's not like these are distinct, separate things, but they interpenetrate, mutually interpenetrate, and can coexist. Now this is really interesting. During the proper Dharma age, one also finds aspects of the Dharma image age and the Dharma ending age. When the Dharma image age comes into being, there is a prevalence of Dharma images, attitudes, but there can also be some that belong to the proper Dharma age and those that belong to the Dharma ending age. So generally speaking, the Dharma, what they call the Dharma proper, or the Dharma existing age, is a time when people's spiritual inclinations and tendencies and aspirations are full swing. They're really high. They're almost blossoming like spring. It's everywhere. No matter where you go, you encounter people cultivating in this way, teachers and sages who are available to this, publications and translations and text, and a lot of contemplative practice going on, plus a lot of giving and a lot of generosity and a lot of compassion and kindness. Minimal things in the world going on like wars and disasters and calamities. This is described as the image age is when there's still practices and exercises going on, but it's more externalized into imagery, into icons, into ritualized devotions. What Max Weber would call the routinization of ritual. In other words, it's there, it's in temples and images and icons, but the real deep inner cultivation is somewhat lagging. People are more into the formalism of it. Dharma declining age, of course, as you can imagine, is described as that which not even the images exist anymore. There's a destruction, and you've seen this historically, of temples and monasteries and of religions in general. They're just removed. And you have a very materialistic, top-down, often hierarchical, undemocratic, a lot of wars and conflict, and a lot of prisons and mistreatment of people and of other living beings. So this is the time you have rampant deterioration of the environment and the environment of plants and animals and so forth. these work hand in hand. So those are the three as described, but what Master was saying, that you can have bits and pieces within each of those. Dharma age and some that belongs to the Dharma ending age. Similarly, the Dharma ending age contains the element of the proper Dharma and the Dharma image age. You can think of time as being divided into three ages: Dharma age, proper or authentic, I would like to say, genuine Dharma, Dharma imagery, and then Dharma declining ending. Or you can combine them to say that in every Dharma age there are elements of proper, Dharma image, and Dharma ending. During the proper Dharma age, there are people who believe in the Buddha, and there are people who don't believe in the Buddha. Those who don't believe pay only attention to the Buddha's image. This would be the Dharma image age within the proper Dharma age. When the Buddha was in the world, there were a lot of people who never saw him, and they didn't understand the Buddha Dharma. That would be Dharma ending age within the proper Dharma age. So the Buddha's there, the Buddha's teaching, but people are just, as I say before, they're just, commuting to work. They don't stop at the monastery, the Jeta Grove or whatnot. There's the Jeta Grove line saying, come to the Jeta Grove tonight, the Buddha's going to speak, da-da-da, zoom. They're just going on, texting, looking at their phones and whatnot. Nobody's paying attention, even though it's there. This could be going on now. There are places in the world where the sutras are being lectured, are being taught, that people are cultivating, meditation sessions are going on and whatnot. And for some people that doesn't exist. It's not even a reality. It's not part of their world. And so this interpenetration that Master was talking about is very actually realistic. It's not fantastic. During the Dharma image, there are people who truly cultivate, certify to arhatship, and gain enlightenment. That's a proper age within the Dharma image age. And right at the same time, there are also people who never hear the Dharma, never draw near to the Sangha, or encounter a Buddha. That would be the Dharma ending age with the Dharma image age. So he says, now it is said to be the Dharma ending age, when the Dharma is declining. At the same time, there isn't much proper Dharma around, and there aren't many aspects of the Dharma image age either, because living beings lack a solid foundation at the present time and don't believe in the Buddha Dharma. Because of confusion and doubts, they aren't able to recognize the Buddha Dharma clearly. They say that the proper Dharma is the Dharma image, and they think that the Dharma ending is the proper Dharma. This also says that sometimes this isn't an external phenomena that happens, that the decline of the Dharma happens within the Dharma teaching itself. This is, the language is used, basically parasites on the lion's flesh, that the corruption and decline of Dharma doesn't come from the outside, from governmental or non-Buddhist threats, but actually comes from a decline of people not cultivating precepts and samadhi and wisdom within their own bodies and within the temples and monasteries. And when that happens, the decline, the cancer starts from within and comes. This is what the Buddha lamented. He said, in that time, what it will happen is the errant sons and daughters of the Buddha themselves will bring about this decline. And so you see the necessity for pure practice and upholding pure monasteries and way places where people cultivate. This part, though, I was just working on something for Dharma Buddhist University. What is this thing? And I was looking for this quote, and I couldn't find it. So I'm preparing for tonight. Boom, it pops out. I think, okay, here it is. And this is Master was saying, in my opinion, we shouldn't even call it Buddhism. It should be called the Dharma of the minds of living beings. Buddhism is the ultimate psychology. It has ultimate true principles. Don't pay attention to whether the Buddha said something or not. If it's in accord with principle, with truth, then it can be believed. And if it isn't, it shouldn't be believed. So now we're investigating this Buddha Dharma and seeking truth. We don't have to get involved in tracing its origins, for to do so is wasting precious time and effort on superficialities. Deeply enter the sutra store and have wisdom like the sea. Don't use effort on the surface of things and never really get anywhere. This just wastes a lot of time. When you investigate the Dharma of living beings, of living beings. Look to this world. Remember the sixth patriarch said, looking for Bodhi outside of this world is like looking for a rabbit with antlers. The Dharma and Bodhi is here in the world in our existential conditions as human beings. Don't look outside. So that means we attend to our relationships, what's going on inside, what's going on outside, and what our relationship is to the larger world. The first thing you must do is to know what living beings' thoughts are like. Living beings don't know what their thoughts are like, and yet they don't want others to know what their thoughts are like either. So we don't study the Buddha Dharma, we study the Dharma of living beings. It's not the Buddha sutras that we study, but the sutras of living beings. Living beings, the Buddha, and the mind are three and yet one. One and yet three. If you say you don't believe in the Dharma that the Buddha spoke, then you can believe in the Dharma of the mind. If you don't believe in the Dharma of the mind, then you can believe in the Dharma of living beings. The mind, the Buddha, and living beings are three, and yet they aren't different. The mind speaks the Dharma of the mind, living beings speak the Dharma of living beings, and the Buddha speaks the Dharma of Buddha Dharma. If you believe, then you believe, and if you don't believe, there's nothing I can do, and there's nothing can be done, because that's what happens in the Dharma ending age. This to me is like, I can't unpack it enough. I just want to stress tonight, though, that something like Dharma Realm Buddhist University, what makes it a university is that it's looking at the mind and living beings across a spectrum of all societies over time. And what it's investigating is the mind, which gives rise to all the myriad forms that we call our institutions, our societies, our literature, and so forth. All of this is created by the mind. So what Master Hua is saying is that the Dharma that we call here is merely a portal into the studying of the mind and the human mind as it universally manifests and creates all things. And that's why the Avatamsaka says the mind is like an artist that creates the entire world. There's nothing that doesn't come from it. So what we're looking at here, say in a liberal arts program at a university that's Buddhist, would be looking at the movements and the activities of the mind as it manifests across all these, the palette, so to speak, of all the colors of different peoples and different thought ways. So this is pretty, anyhow, I found this tonight, so I was quite happy. I copied it down. Sometimes I copy things down and then I forget to save them. And so like yesterday I was working on something really hard and then I took a break, I got some tea and I came back and I was gone. And I'm at a point now at the end of the semester where if I can't do it twice. If I created it once, I can't call it back. I don't have that recall anymore. Maybe it's not the end of the semester, maybe it's another thing going on. But in any event, I was like, then I called Locke. I said, what am I going to do? It's all gone. So let's open it up. Let's share a screen. And sure enough, he found some little button, a little hook that you push, and it brought up what I did in the last hour. I go, whoa, I believe in miracles. So anyhow, I would guess in the Dharma ending age, maybe things just disappear. Maybe sutras disappear. They get lost or they get erased. Or we put them in digital form and take them out of the caves and the scrolls and then there's a power shut off and suddenly it's gone. And somebody says, oh yeah, I memorized a verse here and I memorized a verse there. Well, let's see, how many verses of memorization would it take for us to put together the Avatamsaka Sutra again once it was gone? And somebody saying, well, I got most of it, I just have chapter 40 left. Really? So this idea of memorization, which used to be an ancient preservative technique for the teachings, has fallen out of use. But in fact, it may be something as things move along that's worth looking at again, committing these things to memory. In any event, that was my reading of a long commentary tonight I wanted to get into. If we go ahead now to the verses, and we'll start. I'll do my traditional reading Chinese. And all of you who know Chinese, just grin and bear it. 光的苦行皆修习，日夜精勤无言怠，一读难读识字后，普化众生失其心. That's all I'm going to do, and the rest we'll do in English. He cultivates all the profuse and I'll just do a little, great bitter practices vigorously throughout the day and the night without weariness or fatigue. He's already rescued those who are difficult to rescue by means of his lion's roar, because universally transforming living beings is his practice. Living beings flow and turn in the sea of love and desire, covered over by a net of ignorance and greatly worried and oppressed. The one of utmost humaneness and courage completely pulls them out, vowing that it will be this way in his practice. We in the world are remiss and attached to the 5 desires. We make unreal discriminations and thereby receive a score of suffering. We should uphold and practice the Buddha's great teachings and always gather in our minds, vowing to save all such as these is his practice. Living beings become attached to a self and enter into birth and death. They seek its boundaries, but it cannot be obtained. We should wholeheartedly serve the thus come one and obtain wonderful Dharma. Expounding it to others is his practice. Living beings have no recourse and are bound up with sickness. They sink into the evil destinies by giving rise to the 3 poisons, generating the 3 poisons, are continually scorched by great raging flames. Using a pure mind to save them is his practice. Living beings are confused and deluded and lose the proper path. By constantly walking or on deviant paths, they enter dark places. For their sake, the lamp of proper Dharma is lit. Eternally being a brilliant illumination is his practice. So you noticed in the last section, it was all about expedience. Expedience was the refrain. And now this one is his practice. It's all about his practice, what he does. Whose practice? I'm just asking. I'm not really being rhetorical. It's a question. Whose practice? I went over this again today. I was like, who's the subject of this? Who's his practice? Manjushri? Nobody? The reader? Is his practice, is his practice, is his practice, whose practice? Manjushri speaking. Manjushri speaking and saying, what's his the first verse here? Manjushri starts out and he says, he cultivated all the profuse and bitter practices vigorously throughout day and night, already rescued is his practice. Who is he? It seems to be the Buddha. I mean, I looked at this again and thought, wait a minute. The Buddha is practicing. It's his practice. Now, his practice isn't so much listed because before you see the accumulation of merit and virtue, the attainment of deep wisdom and expedient means. But now you're getting this compassion thrust is his practice. And his practice is no longer going to remote places and just sitting in samadhi meditation removed from the world. This practice looks like it's deeply engaged in the world. Deeply engaged, deeply mingling. So this is very interesting because it sort of sounds like, well, this is what, quote, we understand bodhisattvas to do. But on the other hand, this is being described as Buddhas. Buddhas are not, therefore, in this passage, a text, entering a nirvana of remove and never returning. But rather, they're in the immediate vicinity of living beings, teaching and transforming. So I guess when I look at this section, there seems to be 3 themes. One theme is that this light is released, not because necessarily the Buddha just wants to release light, okay? Or to use a colloquial, he's showing off. But rather it's released because living beings are shrouded in darkness. So the releasing of light is a compassionate gesture rather than a explosion of power for its own sake. And then the light, is, in a sense, is the wisdom that has been acquired, and the releasing of the light is the compassion. So once again, we're back to these two aspects, wisdom and compassion. Without that wisdom, a releasing of light wouldn't go very far, wouldn't go very deep, and wouldn't illuminate much. But without the releasing of the light, the wisdom just stays bottled up and sterile. So it's both that's happening here. Wisdom generates the light causes others to generate their wisdom, which in turn generates more light. So that's one of the first themes. The second theme, which is really and clearly, and you see this in the Lotus Sutra too, the Buddha does not leave the world. So this idea that nirvana is a final extinction of a cultivator called a Buddha, clearly this passage of text differs in that regard. Not only doesn't retreat and doesn't retire, very active. Taking them across is his practice, says the line. He has forever left all difficulties and is always happy. He goes everywhere and visits all lands, I'm quoting from the text, to broadly proclaim the Dharma, which is thus, things as they really are, because universally transforming living beings is his practice. Again, quoting. So this is, to me, this is a really interesting passage, this idea of what is this thing called Buddhahood, and it seems to be some blend of wisdom and compassion that's both in the world but not of the world, that is deeply connected to living beings and yet unmoved and unattached, free of desire and longing and manipulation and craving and identity and anything like this. So this is sometimes it's compared like the moon that moves through empty space, illuminating but sticking nowhere. Sometimes the sun is used as a metaphor for this. But what I'm trying to get at tonight is a little bit is that this is actually the work of the Buddha and not just bodhisattvas. And sometimes when you read these texts, the difference between a Buddha and bodhisattva is almost like, where is it exactly? You know, what is like this thing from the Greeks saying if you close the distance between yourself and a tree and you have the distance and you keep having the distance, will you ever get to the tree? Because you keep having, and supposedly you could keep having and still never quite reach the tree. This idea of where the bodhisattva becomes Buddha is to me simply like that. It seems like at the 10th ground of a bodhisattva and the stage of Buddhahood, I can't really say with exactitude that there's a difference. In some of these texts, it doesn't seem any different. I'll go back to the story I told you once before. It's really a good one. We were at the monastery. I told you a scholar came and said, what's the essence of Buddhism? And so the master turned to all of us and said, well, you've been studying with me for 1 day, 1 week, 1 month, 1 year, 10 years, so each of you answer somehow. And every person gave a different answer. Somebody says, the essence of Buddhism is wisdom. And I said, no, the essence of Buddhism is compassion. No, the essence of Buddhism is precepts and samadhi. No, the essence of Buddha is better practices. No, the essence of Buddha is meditation and prajna. And Master kept going, no. And so finally, after we'd done everything, the little young novice there, Gotong, says, well, what is it then? Because he always wanted to win, be the one. He gave his answer. And the Master said, the essence of Buddhism is change. And the novice said, well, what do you mean, change? The Master said, well, if you're a bad person, you have to become a good person. Oh. And then he said, well, what if you're a good person? And he said, well, if you're a good person, then you have to become a sage. Oh. So he kept going in this engagement. So what if you become a sage? He said, then you have to become a bodhisattva. And they said, well, what if you become a bodhisattva? Master said, then you have to become a Buddha. He says, aha, then you can retire, that's it, right? Because he was always looking for kind of to let the, and the Master said, no. He said, what do you mean, no? He says, well, once you become a Buddha, then you have to become a bodhisattva again. Because you can't abandon living beings. So it was similar to what we're reading here in the sense that if there is only change, these vows to save all living beings never end. even at the stage of what one would call Buddhahood, is just a different way of doing this activity from a higher level. But it isn't a disengagement at that point, that bodhisattvas teach and transform and Buddhas don't. This passage here is very clearly just saying that. So that really struck me as, then of course the novice said, well, I'm not so sure. And the master said, didn't you just read a text where it says in a past time, Guanyin Bodhisattva was a Buddha and then came back to be Guanyin Bodhisattva? He says, well, yeah. So there's this non-fixity to this teaching. But somehow the wisdom and compassion create a dynamic that keeps one going and changing constantly and adapting constantly. And maybe this is nirvana. Nirvana is not a remove or an absence or an end of, but it's a way of being different in the world. And so nirvana and samsara could be seen as non-dual. Within samsara, the changing, suffering world, there are those in a state of nirvana who work in that, and that they're not two different things. That's what the image of the flower, the lotus flower in the muck and water, above muck and water. This is a kind of interesting, but it makes sense because how would you imagine an end? How if you study this material, would you imagine an end? It doesn't work. It just simply doesn't work. It's beginningless and endless. It's presented in that way. So the only thing going on is change. Now, change could be voluntary or involuntary. See, that's the only thing. Yeah, change is a constant. The only constant is change, right? But changing according to your karmic moves is one thing. You are being controlled by your karma. You are changing, but it's driven by karmic good and evil action. If you're changing according to your cultivation and vows, there's still change, but it's in a different realm, it's in a different sphere. So change is a constant, yes, but there's change that is mastered and directed through vows and cultivation, and there is unpleasant, uncontrolled change that's coming because of karma. So I don't think that there's an escape from change, or there's an escape from continual transformation. Because even if you say, well, they have achieved it, but these vows say they come back, and the transformations now are about how to transform and become skilled and adept at teaching and transforming living beings. This whole passage is describing that. So their changes now are perfection of their wisdom and compassion, and not just the removal of karmic obstacles like we do. So we change, we work with repentance and reform and whatnot, but even when you get past that and you're not creating that negative karma anymore, now you're into the world of, this is the karma that should be done. Remember the early verses, teaching, transforming, and so on and so forth. So this, if you're looking for a retirement condo kind of thing, this isn't going to work. This is just not what's being described here. Anyhow. So I just wanted to point out a couple things here, that the one Buddha idea that some people hold to, there was only one Buddha, Shakyamuni Buddha, and then that was it, doesn't accord with these texts. I'm sorry, you've got many Buddhas here, and it doesn't even accord with Dharma, what I call Dharma logic, the logic of Dharma. If living beings are boundless, and one vows to save them all, you see this in Sudha's chapter 39. Sudha says, well, then how long will I be doing this? As many as there are fine motes of dust in 10,000 Buddha, da 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 da. In other words, without beginning or end. So it's a way of being, not a beginning and an end psychology. On one hand, this makes some people nervous because they want to get and obtain and retire. On the other hand, it makes some people feel existentially liberated because there's just a constant going on and perfection and a mastery of something. It's like an art that never ends. So on one hand, you could say it's disappointing that it goes on. On the other hand, it's liberating because it means there's constant change and chances for evolution and transformation and betterment. So this thing depends on how you work it. In any event, Also, I would point out the Buddha never claimed to be the originator, one and only, of this teaching. None in any of the texts that I see this. He's simply saying, a Buddha is simply saying, I am passing along what is coming from antiquity to antiquity to antiquity. You talk about the Buddhas of antiquity. You see it in the Platform Sutra, how many, he goes back, maybe 10. He says that's just scratching the surface. So I didn't invent this, I just rediscovered it. Things as they are is the teaching. So why would someone be the originator? That doesn't make sense. On another level, if the teaching is to replicate the awakening experience of a Buddha, of a Bodhisattva, then by definition, it can't be fixed in time and happen only once. It has to be what we call trans-historical. It has to be universal, available to all living beings, and it has to be continuing through time and history and humanity. Otherwise, it's a done deal. The Buddha accomplished Buddhahood, that's it. Nobody else, that's not the teaching. So if you think about that, then how could there be anything but constant change and transformation going on endlessly? And I think that's what Master Walt was hinting at, these Dharma images, is they're interpenetrating. For example, you can get up in the morning, bow to the Buddha's light incense and say, today I'm going to be a good and new person. I'm not going to do all that crap I did yesterday. I'm going to get new friendships here. My job is harming the environment. I'm going to look for a different job, and I'm going to stop kicking the cat. Okay. And you meditate a little while. You're sitting there, and the cat comes, get out of here, I'm meditating. Oops. Right? Within seconds, you go from a proper to a declining. And the cat hits a wall and dies, and you've gone to the Dharma ending for the cat, you know. But the same thing, okay, I'm not gonna smoke weed anymore, I'm not gonna shoot up anymore, blah, blah, blah. And then you go to a party, well, maybe just a little bit, you know, I don't wanna be weird and not join in. And so you've gone from the proper in the morning to this decline in the afternoon, and then you go out and you get in an accident or something the way when you hit somebody, and now you're into another level. And so that you go from almost thought to thought, from Dharma, genuine, authentic, to declining, to gone, and then back again. So if it can happen in the psychology of a person, day to day, moment to moment, why would we not assume that this could happen over time with many people coming together at different times and these interpenetrating? An example. This isn't necessarily a Buddha land, but it's pretty close. Here we are in Berkeley Buddhist Monastery. Okay, there's no killing, there's no stealing, there's no sexual misconduct, there's no drugs and intoxicants. Incense is not an intoxicant, it doesn't count, okay? Oh, whoa, man, no, incense is not an intoxicant. And technically there's no lying because nobody's talking to each other. Now that doesn't mean there's no self-deception, I don't want to go that far, but at least there's no lying when nobody's talking to each other. So by definition, that's a bit of a pure land. And there's a bit of a concentration. You're listening to me babble, and you're a little bit focused on that, and you just read a text, and so there's a little samadhi going on, and maybe a little wisdom coming. Okay? That's a Dharma proper experience that's going on. It's not Zoom. Well, some people are getting the Zoom, but even that, you're still here, technically immersed in this environment. So this is a bit of the genuine Dharma age, time. Okay? You know very well that in other places, decline is going on, major decline is going on. Right now, as we're sitting here, there are pockets of decline all over the world. According to this, all over the world. Because the hells are pockets of decline gone, and they're reified into these seemingly fixed realms, but they're not. They will change too. The hells, animals, ghosts, and so forth, these are realms where the Dharma is not heard. And there's regions in this world where it's not heard, not even imagined, right now. And then there's times here where it's only superficial. You know, formalism is going on. People are worshiping images and also fishing for good luck and responses, you know, superstitious practices. Say, you know, hey, Guan Yin, I lied on my taxes. Can you protect me this time? You know, really get me by. You know, this kind of thing is going on all the time. The fishing for things. That's the image age. There's still a little belief, but it's externalized. It's quid pro quo, this kind of thing, but not really transformation. So if you look at this, then you could see that this stuff is happening over time, continuing, constantly, interpenetrating, intermixing within ourselves, within all worlds, and so forth. The last thing I think this is saying in terms of themes before I go is that these teachings and teachers then are for inspiration and not for salvation. Because if it is true that the only way one gets to be awakened and liberated is through working on your own person, it doesn't come any other way. That's why eating, you nourish yourself; wearing clothes, you warm yourself; sleeping, you refresh yourself; cultivating, you awaken yourself. There's no other shortcut to that. If that's the case, then these things are inspirational teachings and not salvation. They can't bring salvation. Nobody can save you but yourself. No one can, no one may. You yourself must walk the path. Buddhas only show, inspire the way. That's from the Dhammapada. So if that's the case here, then you see again this evolving, this very dynamic, rich thing that's going on. And you can see why Master Hua was saying, the teaching's about living beings. It's about the mind. It's about you. It's about transforming yourself. That's what it's all about. It's not out there. It's not in just the preservation of text and monasteries and temples and wearing little amulets around your neck. Better to have the amulet in your mind and actually, I don't say swallow it, don't swallow the amulet, but embody it in the sense is what it's about. Anyhow, how weird that I didn't get to my verses tonight. So I had so much more to share, and I was going to share another story out of the OJ. This is I call the OJ, the Orange Journal, and already I babble on and wasted time. So I guess I should probably stop here for the night. And then we'll pick this up. It looks like, honestly, I'm going to be honest with you, I don't know that we're going to finish these sections in 2 more classes. I don't want to rush through it. I know you'd like, but we're okay because remember, everything's changing and there's no end and no beginning. Oh, I just set it up for myself so I can just, I can just go on and on. Yeah. So maybe if you have a question or two you can ask. I have a passage I wanted to read tonight that went with the verse of the 6th verse here about an encounter that happened on the highway. But if I jump to that without going through the first 5, I'm getting to the cherry without eating the cake. So I don't know if I can tell you any other related tale. Any questions? I see the monks are still gone. Still on the East Coast? Yes or no? Luke?
They'll be back at 10.
They'll be back here at 10? Tonight? You want to sit around and wait? No. Okay, so they're coming back. Any questions?
Marty, there was a question last week.
Okay.
The question was, if everything is an illusion, should one question everything one sees or experiences?
Say the second. If everything's an illusion,
Should one question everything one sees or experiences?
did you understand that? I didn't quite understand that. Explain it to me.
So if everything is an illusion, then should we just question everything that we see around us or can experience around us? That was the question. Maybe Luke, you can clarify that?
Everything, to say that everything is an illusion is saying that in the state of a me and a mine, in the unenlightened state, as we see things through the crooked lenses of our altered consciousness, then yes, everything is illusory and cannot be relied on because it's a projection, it's mediated by that. To actually say that everything is an illusion actually is redundant because it presumes that there are things that aren't. So if you say everything's an illusion, that's a corrective to a wrong view that everything isn't changing and in flux and in constant, and also a reflection of our consciousness. Is that clear? In other words, everything is an illusion is a corrective teaching to a fundamental wrong view that there is some solid, real, self-existing stuff, me and mine, out there. And therefore, everything's an illusion, everything's impermanent, everything's like a dream, illusion, bubble, shadow. This is corrective therapeutic medicine to break an attachment and wrong view. Once you set up the attachment and wrong view, then the medicine has to come saying it's impermanent, it's not self, and it's suffering, the three marks of things. But that comes only because we set up the wrong view that it's not that way, that this then comes in to be the corrective for it. So what was the second part? So you should question everything you see. But what cultivation is fundamentally challenging and questioning one's views and attachments. But the questioning isn't just intellectually, I doubt, therefore I am, kind of thing. But the questioning has to do with the changing of your very being through precepts, samadhi, concentration. That's the questioning. Because if you sit around and intellectually question, you're just going to end up in one rat hole and another. You're going to attach and you're going to come up with an altered view. The only way to break out of the questioning is to question this, the seer, the believer, and purify that so that it sees clearly and the questions answer themselves. But to begin questioning it is still a questioner looking at something out there. It's setting up that dichotomy, and as long as this is the arbiter of truth. I once asked my teacher, I was asking questions and so on and so forth, and he said, I said, maybe I asked too many questions. He said, no, you don't ask enough. He says, you don't question the questioner, that's the question. He says, you're asking all these clever questions and we can play this game, tennis, back and forth forever. Yes, no, right, wrong, long, short, tall, blah, blah. But the questioner, that's what you're questioning. The questioning of everything as an illusion is just the beginning of questioning the illusion-making mechanism that you're doing. You are the one that making things illusory, making them seemingly real. So then you start to question, what is this thing going on? What is this thing doing? Who is this that is doing this? And the only way you get at that is to stop the mad mind from doing it. You can write PhD theses on this kind of thing and come up with all kinds of clever answers, but the only real answer is directly seen and knowing for yourself. When that mad mind stops, that very stopping is bodhi. So the questioning mind also has to stop and then turn the light around and illumine within. Light up your mind, see your nature. That's how the questioning starts. Not by shooting the light out and doing 100,000 investigations. Eventually, you have to come back to this. As the ancient text says, what everybody wishes to know is that. But our means of knowing that is this. How can we possibly know that? Only through polishing, cultivating, perfecting this. So that self-cultivation, the simple act of getting rid of greed, anger, and stupidity, of becoming a really good person, perfecting your humanity, breaking attachments and views that are actually not in accord with reality, the question then answers itself. And you don't have to question anything anymore. I hope that kind of helps. Because sometimes we can think we have a university, we have classes, we have these evening things, and this is a philosophical, intellectual inquiry. That is only the beginning. But this real philosophy is to become totally different, to become totally transformed so that the way you see is like Buddha. It's completely awakened without any filters, any attachments, any confusion. That is what happens in the Platform Sutra when the first teacher, the first master asked him, well, could you give me what you learned? Could you tell me what it is? Bring it out and show it to me, describe it. And he said, there's nothing to get, there's nothing to tame. We just talk about seeing, jin, seeing. But you know this jin is the jin, jiao jin, Jiao illuminated seeing. Illuminated seeing. It's not just looking, and it's not just cogitating or intellectualizing. It's illuminated seeing. What that means, you see it clearly, directly, without any mediation, and you do not have to have a PhD to do that. In some ways, that could get in the way. So it comes from purity of mind, stillness of heart. When purity and stillness reach the ultimate point, all questions are answered, everything is seen, and then you return to the root and go back to the source. It's really wonderful, but that's what makes it universally available. You don't have rich or poor, this tribe, this ethnicity, this clan, this time in history, smart or not smart. All of this has nothing to do with it. Sixth patriarch was illiterate. So it's sort of an example for us. It's not gained through knowledge and views. It's gained through purity and stillness. Okay. I have a poem. I'll do a quick poem if I can find it. Whew. Dan, I'll tell you the story next week. It's a really interesting story. Yeah. So this I was thinking of, when I go up to Maine, and I'll be going up to Maine again this summer, I hope. I was talking to my sister on the phone, and I was saying, yeah, well, I'm going to be in Maine, and then I really want to get in the water in the lake. And she had it on speaker, and the dog knows those words. Water, lake, that means swimming, that means fun. I could hear all this barking going on. I said, oops, got to turn off the speakerphone. She's in Virginia, not up in Maine. Anyhow, that's my companion when I'm up there. But one of the things I've come to like about Maine is when I go up there, it's raw in a sense. Again, it's natural. It's like Redwood Vihara. If you go around Redwood Vihara and you just walk through the woods, trees and limbs just fall by themselves effortlessly. There's just no self there. I mean, we move them and set them up and make pathways and some, that's the human markings. But if you just walk through nature, one branch falls on the other, and if it lasts, it just stays there for a while. The moss grows here and doesn't grow there. Birds come, perch, and move on. And some trees grow, but some trees, especially at the top, just lose their vitality. And then sometimes I look up there and I see, oh, I'd like to go up and trim that, but it's like 80 feet. There's no way I'm going to go up. I tried it once. I nearly took my head off, so I'm not going to do that again. So it's just like, let it be, let it be. And then I noticed that dead tree thing up there turned out to be an eagle's nest. The eagles came, thought, that's a great place, built a nest there and hatched new eagles in this little place that was nothing there, right? It was in a little bit of an eyesore. And so I'm changing, but this is a poem, again, from our poet, and the Chinese, I'm not going to say it. This is called The Bamboo by Li Che-yun's Window. Very short. Bamboo. Don't cut it to make a flute. Don't trim it for a fishing pole. When the grass and flowers are all gone, it will be beautiful under the falling snowflakes. Isn't that lovely? It's this sort of thing of finding beauty in the simplest things that are untouched. Even something as a piece of bamboo that's in the winter just there, not cut for a fishing pole, not utilized for a flute, but simply as a framing for the falling snow. There's so much that in this that I'm learning when I'm up in Maine, but also perhaps a message about not messing too much with the environment and making it too humanized, too cut and clean and neat. There's something that comes back to us when we just encounter it, untouched, unmanicured. And so I think sometimes maybe a good death or something like that. Or something like that. Okay, enough for tonight. I promise. Next week, I will go to these verses and then share this story with you. Sorry, I continue to bite off more than I can chew. Chew less than I can digest. We had a talk, and people were listening and watching, and then all of a sudden, everybody was just kneeling, and there was dead silence. And mouths were going, but there was no sound. And so the people online were kind of wondering, so tonight, we'll leave the sound on. But again, it's my voice, so you guys are going to have to sing up a little. May every living being, our minds as one and radiant with light, share the fruits of peace with hearts of goodness, luminous and bright. If people hear and see how hands and hearts can find in giving unity, may our minds awake to great compassion, wisdom, and to joy. May kindness find reward. May all who sorrow leave their grief and pain. May this boundless light dispel the darkness of our endless night. Because our hearts are one, this world of pain turns into paradise. May all become compassionate and wise. May all become compassionate and wise. Bow in respect to the triple jewel.